The first key player we're going to talk about is Winston Churchill. His mom was an American and his dad was a British politician. Throughout his life, he was kind of the rebellious child, not super great at school. Him and his dad had a contentious relationship because his dad was overly critical of him. And by the time he was 18, he was like, I'm gonna join the army. And so he joins the British Army. Shortly thereafter, his dad passes away, and he sees this as an opportunity to prove himself to his dad, and he joins politics in 1900. By 1906, he had ascended to power very quickly, especially after the Liberals won a decisive electoral victory. By 36, he was the civilian head of the British Navy, which meant that he was able to have a lot of power in the military, the Navy specifically, okay? So then in 1914, we know it's the outbreak of World War I. And he sees this as an opportunity for him to influence global events. And so during this time, he promotes the use and the development of new weapons. And some of these weapons are like airplanes and tanks. And he decides, you know what? We're going to get Germany. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to attack their ally, Turkey. So he sends some troops over there, and it failed miserably. And he was, people blamed him, of course, because he was the one that sent the troops to Turkey, and a lot of them died. It was a complete disaster, honestly. And so people were pissed. And that started his fall from power. So he felt really bad about that situation. And so he actually volunteered to be an infantry officer for 6 months. He served in the trenches. It was really dangerous. And he fought in World War I. Then he comes back. He's a politician again. He's living his life. And he starts to warn people as he sees the Nazi regime take power in Germany. He's like, hey, yo, we better be careful with this. Like, this is not good. But people weren't really listening to him. He was elected as prime minister on May 10th, 1940, the exact same day that Hitler launched his invasion of France, Belgium, and Holland. By June 9th, Hitler had already taken over France. France had fallen, and Winston Churchill is stressing. So he's desperate. He calls up his contacts in America. He's like, hey, yo, FDR, we need your help. And so he intensifies that contact with FDR in order to have support against Germany when he was pretty sure that Germany was going to attack. The next person we're going to talk about, our next key player, is FDR. And we have talked about FDR so much that at this point, if you don't know who he is, I don't know how to help you. Google it. Okay, so FDR, as we know, he becomes the president during the Great Depression. Hoover falls out of grace because he didn't really do anything to help the people during the Great Depression. And FDR made all these promises, and he was like, yo, I'm going to put these like New Deal things. I'm going to talk to you over the radio and my fireside chats. He's personable. People like personable. He seems cool. So let's talk about World War II and FDR. So he holds off getting involved. He's friends with Churchill. They're like in contact, but he's like, it's really none of our business. That's some foreign affairs shit, and we're not about to get involved. Okay. Okay. Then he starts to get a little concerned as he sees Hitler attacking other countries, especially Poland in September of 1939. And he was like, listen, we're still neutral. We're neutral. We're not taking sides. But I'm a little concerned about this. This is not okay. Then with the fall of France in 1940, American mood and Roosevelt's policy changed dramatically. Congress actually enacted a draft for military service, and Roosevelt signed something called the Lend-Lease in March 1941. And so this enabled the nation to furnish aid to nations at war with Germany and Italy. And even though we technically on paper were neutral and we were still at peace, we were becoming an arsenal of democracy, and our factory started producing supplies for these countries that were facing Germany and Italy. So then, December 7th, 1941, the Japanese surprise attacked Pearl Harbor. And that was a declaration of war. And so Roosevelt exercised his powers as commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and he actively carried this role out. He worked with and through his military advisors, and he overrode them when he felt like it was necessary. And he took an active role in choosing the principal field of commanders and in making decisions during, regarding the wartime strategies. Okay, so he moved to create this thing called the Declaration of the United Nations. And we actually still have the United Nations today. It's super cool. It's downtown. That's a peacekeeping organization. And this was founded on January 1st, 1942. And this was all the nations who came together in order to fight against the Axis power. Okay, quick recap. The next key player is Hitler, Adolf Hitler. During the outbreak of World War I, Adolf Hitler joins the German army. Technically, his citizenship was Austrian, but he joins and he's accepted. Most of his time was spent outside of the battlefield, but the battles that he was in were actually crucial battles, and he actually got injured in one of them and received awards for his bravery. He became embittered after the collapse of the war effort, and he felt like the Treaty of Versailles was demeaning, and he was not happy about it. He blamed civilian leaders and Marxists for the decisions that were then made about Germany. After World War I, he continues to work for the military as an intelligence officer, and he starts monitoring the activities of this German Workers' Party, or the DAP. And he really digs it. He's like, ooh, anti-Semitic? Tell me more. Nationalist? Oh, yes. Anti-Marxist? Can agree. And he really agrees with this ideology of the DAP. And he's invited to join by their leader, Anton Drexler, or their founder. So he is able to gain a lot of notoriety because of his hateful speeches against the Treaty of Versailles, rival politicians, Marxists, and Jews. And nothing brings people together quite as much as mutual hate. And that's just a thing. I don't even know what that's all about. But people were like, hell yeah, I hate those people too. And he gained a lot of popularity that way. So fast forward a little bit, he ends up being the chancellor. And he uses this position to form a de facto legal dictatorship. Again, he thought that he knew everything that was best for Germany. So this is perfect for him. This is like unlimited power as a dictator. Hell yeah, he's about it. So he gives his cabinet full legislative power for a period of 4 years and allows deviation from the German constitution. Having achieved full power over the legislative and executive branches of government, Hitler and his political allies embarked on a systematic suppression of remaining political opposition. So they took out their competition. Anyone who opposed was taken care of, okay? So by July 14th, 1933, Hitler's Nazi party was declared the only legal political party in Germany. So then we have the beginning of World War II. He, along with several other European leaders, signed the Munich Agreement. And this treaty gave over some districts to Germany, reversing part of the Treaty of Versailles, like what was agreed upon. He loved the attention that he got for that. He was named Times Man of the Year in 1938. He was like, oh yeah, on top of the world. He felt good about himself. So this kind of led him to escalate his activities by 1940 when he invades the Netherlands and Belgium, okay? He then ordered bombing raids on the United Kingdom with the goal of eventually invading them. And he formed a formal alliance with Japan and Italy, and that is what formed the Axis powers. The fourth key player that we're talking about is Joseph Stalin. So he came into power in the mid 1920s, and he was the leader of the Soviet Union. This was a very underdeveloped country at the time, and it had mostly agriculture and very little industry. So Russia had been through World War I. They had two revolutions in 1917. They had a civil war. They had famine. Like, they were not doing so hot, okay? These events left their economy in shambles. So then in 1928, Stalin began rapid industrialization. Factories were built, transit networks were developed, workers were encouraged and actually forced to work harder. And Stalin used this because he wanted their economy to rival that of capitalist countries. He was ruthless. He killed at least 20 million people who died under his reign. He was hated and feared. So then World War II happens. So his rule in World War II. He had to reach out to FDR, the United States, and the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, because he had an agreement with Germany, or Hitler, and this agreement said, hey, yo, we're gonna leave you alone. But Hitler didn't listen to that, and he starts attacking the Soviet Union. And they were too weak to fight on their own. So Stalin writes letters to both Roosevelt and Churchill begging for help. And eventually they were able, because the US and Britain were able to occupy Germany, the USSR became strong enough to defeat Germany during and after World War II, and actually became one of the most powerful nations in the world. And because of Stalin's focus on industrialization, they were able to do that at the cost of many Russian lives, mind you. But he was able to help their economy, which was his plan all along. Last but certainly not least, we have Benito Mussolini. So let's just start with World War I. He is part of the Socialist Party, but then he sees World War I as an opportunity for Italy to become a world power. So he breaks his ties with the Socialist Party because that's in direct contrast of their ideals. And he would, well, I guess he was mostly expelled from the organization because his ideals no longer match theirs. He joins the Italian army in 1915 and fights in the front lines, eventually getting wounded and discharged from the military. After the war, he continues his political activism and eventually organizes the Fascist Party. With the help of terrorist groups, he's able to become the dictator of Italy. And he was able to reduce unemployment, which made him very popular with the people. And he also worked with public works programs. So another reason why people were like, I mean, yeah, he's a dictator and he took over by using terrorist force, but he's doing some stuff for us. So anyway, so World War II, this is what's happened. He was determined to show his strength and the strength of his regime. And so he invades Ethiopia. And the people in Ethiopia were no match for their tanks and their airplanes. And he was quickly able to capture the land. German dictator Adolf Hitler then establishes a relationship with Benito Mussolini. Again, they have very similar ideas. They're both really booty hurt over the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. And they both rise to power as dictators. So, Mussolini, he's flattered because Hitler wants to sign a pact of steel. That's what the alliance is called.